My next guest also has a background in law enforcement and has personally dealt with protesters. Now joining me in the studio is Senator Dan Schoen. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
When the bill that would allow state agencies to sue convicted protesters for costs related to their demonstrations in a House committee, protesters shut down that meeting. What are your thoughts on this bill, which Senator Ingebrigtsen has authored in the Senate?
I think that them showing up and shutting down that meeting is a really strong example of how a lot of people in society are feeling about their government right now, and it's about the responsiveness. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't be accountability for actions. There are accountability measures in our law currently. If there is something that happens, if there's damages that are incurred to a property owner, they can recoup those costs now. I mean, there are civil remedies for that. What I'm fearful of is that these particular pieces of legislation send a message that our government is trying especially hard to target one particular area that people feel like they don't like people standing up against their government. And I get personally upset when I see my partners out on the highway get rocks dropped on their head from an overpass. I find it deplorable. I find it ridiculous, and swift and heavy consequences should be levied to those people. The idea that because of an unrest that someone doesn't agree with, that we should take extra measures to make sure that people have to not be heard or have to fear sending their message, really is a step that we need to be cautious about. It doesn't mean that there's not ideas of merit within these pieces of legislation, but we need to be very careful about the message that we send to the public, even by the bills that we introduce.
One of the arguments for this bill is that if you get lost in the boundary waters, you're charged for the cost of your rescue. If you drive your truck on thin ice and it goes in, you are charged to pull your truck out. If you have a medical emergency, you pay for those expenses. So shouldn't protesters, if they're convicted, pay for the expenses they incur for the police response and everything else?
Well, first, let's go back to the medical emergency. That's health care, and that people have insurance for that. Yes, you do pay for that, and the bill gets submitted to your insurance, health insurance company. Always has been, and nothing's changed from that. If you go into the boundary waters, there are several ways that you could incur costs for the rescue that you may need. That requires a lot of forethought. And this is one of those things where if you're one singular individual and you're walking down the lane of down the highway right now, it may not be a protest, but I, as an officer, will come pick you up and bring you off the highway if that's what you need, and you'll pay no extra expenses. So how do you figure out who's going to pay? And they're going to say, well, if you're convicted, well, then how much? How much are you going to pay? Are you going to pay for your percentage? Because if there's 1,000 people out there and there's $1,000 worth of damage, are you the one, do you pay $1? What is the overtime cost? Who gets levied that? I mean, this is the issue that's within these pieces of legislation. They're a lot about emotion and not a lot about fact, and a lot about what is it going to solve. And how do you determine which person pays for all the overtime? Or with the Women's March, they had a permit for 20,000 people, and 100,000 people showed up, including my 11-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son. So how much are they going to pay?
Let's move to the bill that has moved through the House and the Senate, and that's the one that would make it a gross misdemeanor instead of a misdemeanor for blocking traffic. Senator Ingebrigtsen expressed concern for public safety and the safety of law enforcement when things get out of hand. He also pointed out the risk to ambulances and other emergency vehicles for not being able to get through. How should we handle protest that escalates when people get hurt?
Well, that's a whole other level. If people are getting hurt, we can handle that now. But make no mistake about it, there are people, I'm frustrated when I see the highway shut down, and that's my first thought too, is what if an ambulance needed to get to her, or I needed to get to a partner that needed help? Somebody's in their car having a heart attack? Yeah, absolutely. That is very, very troubling to think about. It could happen anywhere. I feel that same way if a train is blocking the railroad tracks, if construction slows you down and you didn't know it. There could be an accident ahead and things could be completely blocked as well. I think what's important is that, are we taking away any tools for officers to do the job that they need to do? And I pointed out in committee, if I'm the watch commander, if I'm the supervisor, I don't necessarily want to have a mandate in that statute that all of a sudden, now remember, going from a misdemeanor to a gross misdemeanor means that you go to jail and you spend the weekend in jail. If it's a misdemeanor, you can go to jail and then we can say it's okay to bail out, bond out. It also gives the impression to society that there's wiggle room to negotiate with folks. If 500 people lay down on the highway or 1,000 people lay down on the highway, and we're going to arrest every single one of them for a gross misdemeanor, we don't even know how much it's going to cost. Because I might be able to work out a deal with the folks to walk on the highway, because that's what they're going to do. And we say, listen, if you get off, if you're going to enter at Snelling and you're going to get back off at Dale right away, then we'll protect you. If you continue past Dale, then we're going to arrest everybody that goes. And that's absolutely what should happen if there's an agreement. And then they should go to jail. But that might be the difference between 2 hours of a highway closed and 12 hours. So then what happens? We just really need to sit and think about what we're doing. These bills really play to people's emotions and fears, and the fear of what they don't understand or what they don't know. And then it also plays to the fear of being inconvenienced, or the idea that absolutely, what if something were to happen? We deal with that in our business all the time. It's not comfortable. I don't like seeing it. I don't want to be slowed down. None of my friends, I hear from friends from all walks of life who get frustrated with it because they don't understand. And I think some of that is on us as well. We don't understand, so we need to learn and listen about some of the base of what some of these protests are about. I don't necessarily have to agree with all the points, but I think it's incumbent upon me as a policymaker and as a police officer to be understanding that I really don't want to be seen as trying to be one of those folks that's trying to inhibit your free speech. And
Senator,
you're right, it is not free speech to be on the highway, but it does send a message about what happens here.
Senator Schoen, I want to thank you for coming today. We've run out of time.
All right, thank you.